Oh, hello everyone. Today is my great pleasure to have with us Deanna&Tyrus, Professor and Director of Italian Studies in the Department of European Languages and Studies, and Tyrus Miller, Dean of the School of Humanities, Professor of English and Art History. Today, they're going to show us how to do Maryland-style crab cakes. So, Deanna&Tyrus, thank you so much for joining me, and take it away.
Okay, thank you. Well, we wanted to start by actually just talking a little bit about the history of the Maryland crab cake. It has a kind of, cultural connection with my native city of Baltimore. Baltimore was where Deanna studied for her PhD at Johns Hopkins. It's where we met, and actually crab and crab cakes and so forth was really a part of that history together. But that's not so much the history that I'm going to tell. I'm going to tell a little bit about the history of the food itself. And one thing to note about this is that the crab cake has undoubtedly an ancient or even an archaic history. It was prepared in pretty much the way that we're going to be doing by the indigenous people of the Maryland Chesapeake Bay, Piscataway. Sorry, can I just start that again?
Yeah, because we can edit, don't worry.
Okay, so they were
Let me pause for a second. Okay, so Tyrus, tell us a little bit more about the crab cakes.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that the crab cake has a kind of special place in Baltimore, where I'm from, my family's from. Deanna did her PhD study at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. We met there, so eating crabs and crab cake is really a part of that story.
You have a lot of family ties to
That's right.
crab cakes.
But I want to just tell a little bit about a history that's not our personal history with the crab cake, but a little bit about maybe the cultural history of the crab cake. And the first thing to note is that really the crab cake and the way that we're going to prepare it probably goes back, has an ancient history, probably an archaic history even. They were prepared in this way, pretty much the same way by the indigenous people of the Maryland and Virginia Chesapeake Bay, the Piscataway and the Powhatans of coastal Virginia. And their way of preparing this food was actually adopted early on by the European colonists as well. So really back to the very founding of the European colonies, there was this kind of food exchange that involved the crab cake. Now, the crab, along with other seafood, was an important food source for the Chesapeake Bay throughout the 18th and the 19th century. We probably often talk about fishermen. On the Chesapeake Bay, they talk about watermen. And watermen because they also include oysters, shrimp, crabs, and other sorts of things that come from that marshy estuary area, mussels and so forth. So the waterman was a kind of labor figure in the Chesapeake Bay. Now, there's also a kind of modern history of the crab cake, and it goes back about a century to the 1920s. And two important things happened in the 1920s. First of all, New Jersey was a kind of competing place for crab habitat. The rivalry of Maryland and New Jersey. And about that time, the New Jersey crab habitats got overfished and the production went down, and almost all the crab fishing shifted to the Chesapeake Bay. And this was, of course, before the age of refrigerated trains and trucks that allowed crabs to be sent all over the world, all over the country. It's hard to move these very perishable crabs around. So Baltimore and the surrounding area became nationally known for this very special dish that you could get there, this very special food that you could get there. The other thing that happened was that the crab pot, which was, kind of a typical way of fishing crabs, was invented by Benjamin F. Lewis. It was patented in 1928, and it really replaced the traditional way of catching crabs, which was a kind of baited cord that you would keep in the water, and the crabs would bite them, and you would haul them up. That's obviously a very slow and labor-intensive, and you catch rather few crabs that way. And the crab pot allowed a kind of expansion of the industry. It's kind of a wire cage that gets lowered in the water, and the crabs go in and get caught there.
Right.
The other thing that happened around this time is that the crab cake itself got branded and kind of codified. So in the 1930s, in connection with the New York World's Fair, there was a World's Fair cookbook, and in that cookbook, a man, the author of the cookbook, basically kind of put Maryland crab cakes as one of the items, and it sort of, took hold. It was also about the time when it was possible to kind of have more refrigeration and send things around. Also, one of the ingredients that we'll be using, and I don't have ownership in this company, so it's not a product placement, but Old Bay seasoning was invented again around this time in 1939. It was a blend of 18 spices. Nobody entirely knows what all the 18 spices are, but
a German
refugee named Gustav Brunn came to Maryland in 1939, and he invented Old Bay seasoning. And this is actually, if I have to think about a family tradition, even though it's a commercial product, I would say our traditional recipe is kind of like follow the recipe on the back of the can of Old Bay seasoning. So it does actually go back, quite a way. It has at least that much tradition back to the 1930s. I also just wanted to say, I have a couple of real memories that are connected with crabbing, and one is my grandfather, when I was very, very little, about 2.5 or 3 years old, took me out on a boat for fishing and crabbing on the Bush River, and we caught, we hauled up crabs and things, and that was kind of almost one of my first memories. And then throughout my childhood and into my adulthood, summer was a time of backyard meals where you would just spread the picnic tables with newspapers, and you would get crates of whole crabs, and people would be making crab cakes and crab soup and coleslaw, and would drink National Bohemian or National Premium beer, which were the terrible beers of Baltimore. I didn't drink that as a child, but as I got a little older, I experienced the pleasure of National Bow and National Premium. So that's kind of the little bit of background that I wanted to give, and I want to hand the microphone over to Deanna, who's actually we've done some prep of crab cakes and some accompaniments, and she's going to tell you about those recipes.
So thank you very much for sharing this history of the dish and also your personal memory. And now, Deanna, it's your turn.
All righty.
As the
okay.
cook.
Okay. How's my sound? Am I good?
Very good. Yeah.
Okay. So this is so easy that we could actually afford to have a little history lesson before it. Crab cakes are kind of the lazy person's way to eat crab because, as Ty was saying, another traditional way is to just steam them in Old Bay and water and then dump them out on a table, and everyone gets out hammers and picks, and you sit there whiling away the evening, eating these things very slowly, getting the meat out of the shells. The crab cake is this thing where it's all done for you, or you've done it all in advance. And so Ty has made a batch of these before this episode here so that we can show you when they're done, but I'm going to mix up another batch right now for you, and you'll see just how easy it is. So the main thing is that you want fresh crab meat if you can find it. And we've never tried it with canned. It probably works, but this is actually something where, this is preserved, but it's just premium crab, real crab meat. And it can be lump crab meat or claw. And something that Ty was reminding me of before we started today is that the claw meat, though it's smaller, it's sort of shredded, it's actually the more flavorful part. So don't think you have to have the fancy schmancy thing. I've got about, well, I'm not going to tell you the amounts don't match for what I'm showing because it's been split, but I'm going to give you the ingredients for the recipe, and of course you'll have it. So this is a pound. Let's pretend it's a pound of crab meat. And then you want to add a couple of eggs for a pound of crab meat. They should be beaten. I just thought I would save this part so you could watch me do this.
Perfect.
It's always fun to beat up an egg for a camera, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that can go away. And then we have a teaspoon of the Old Bay. That's going to go in there. It's nice having a sous chef who prepared all this for me.
Yes.
Let's see, 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce.
Yes. Yes.
And some breadcrumbs. This happens to be panko, but you can use traditional breadcrumbs. Or you can also use crackers. Ty's reminding me that many people just used crackers back in the day. And then about, let's see, how much is this? Anyway, some black pepper.
Yes.
Some mustard. And a little bit of mayonnaise. It's really best not to use salad dressing, that mayonnaise substitute that some people like to put on their sandwiches. You want the real thing here. So the simpler, the better, really.
Yes.
And I think that's everything. Do I have everything in here?
Looks like it to me.
All righty. Then, once you've mixed it up, you just make it into patties. Yeah. I don't think I need to show you how to make a patty, right? You know, you're going to pick up spoonfuls of it and just make little round patties out of it. And then once you've made your crab cake patties, that's really what they are. You can either pan fry them, that's what we did today, in just a little bit of oil, or you can brush them with the oil and put them in your oven and cook them up that way. We were using our oven for something else this morning, so we did it the pan fried way. And here are the crab cakes that Ty made before we started.
Wow, they look wonderful. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what we made to go, the sort of traditional things, it must be said that, it must be said that these days crab is not the food of the working poor as it was back in the days of the great crab fishing operations in the Chesapeake Bay. So it's a little bit extravagant to make crab cakes, right? You buy this stuff. But the accompaniments that go with a crab cake dinner are really, really simple. And so one of them, and this is a recipe from Ty's mother that I got. It's hardly a secret recipe either. Basically, I have just shredded in my food processor, but I used to do it also just with a knife. This is cabbage. It's just a head of green cabbage. I add to it, this is basically going to be a slaw. It's not coleslaw technically, I think, because coleslaw is that thing with mayonnaise and stuff in it. And really, with a slaw, you know, you want to mix this stuff up. The thing about a slaw is, if it's classic, it doesn't have any oil in it. You can put oil in it if you want to. Sometimes I make an Asian version of this, so I put a few drops of sesame oil to give it that aroma, and I use rice vinegar. But the classic that I am going to show you here is, and I'm not even measuring this, it's just white wine vinegar. And what you're really doing, you need quite a lot of this, because what you're doing is actually pickling. You're making a quick pickle. And so you also need salt. You know, if your diet will permit it, you need a generous amount of salt. What happens is that if you, this is about a half teaspoon there, and then usually add some kind of seed. And today I'm going to use caraway and also some celery seed. A little bit of a repetition from the crab cakes, because a big ingredient in Old Bay seasoning is celery seed.
Yes.
And by the way, I think we didn't mention, but you can buy Old Bay anywhere. I got mine at Albertsons. So this is it. You mix it up. You can put other things in it. Sometimes I shred a turnip or some other root vegetable, or even a beet or two for something red.
Yes.
And if you make this just a little bit before it's time to eat, then it will soften. And by the time you're ready to add it, I've got such a big amount here because this is frankly going to, feed us this week.
So you can keep it for quite a while.
Oh yeah, you can keep it. That's the great thing. It's one of those things you can make on a weekend, or it's so fast you can make it any day, and it'll keep for several days. As the salt and the vinegar react with the ingredients, the slaw gets very silky and tender. And so it tastes a little different every day, and you might end up needing to drain it a little bit because the cabbage gives off its water. But yeah, this it just turns into a beautiful, very digestible, fresh tasting salad. And this is a basic technique for making any kind of a slaw. That's
fantastic. I've learned something today. I'm going to copy that one for sure.
Oh, great.
Also the cakes.
Yeah, the cakes are so great. And then we just made one other thing that we wanted to show you. A lot of times if you go to a crab house, that's what they're called, a crab restaurant, they're often called crab houses in Maryland. Everybody orders French fries and things like that. And there's a healthier version of that we like to make in this house. And I'm just gonna, would you mind draining those for me? Basically, we just slice potatoes. I like to use Yukon Golds. Some people use a russet or something, depending on how much starch you want. And I'm going to turn my back on the camera for a second. I just toss the potato slices. Here's potatoes sliced, about 1/8 of an inch thick. Toss them with a little bit of oil. Don't overdo it because they really don't need much. Again, some salt because potatoes really, really bring out their flavor with salt. I need my spoon. Toss these.
You have a fantastic helper today.
Yeah, I do. Well, and he made the crab cakes. And then I just put these on a cookie sheet and stick them in an oven at 450. And if you watch them and you turn them once, they come out looking like this.
Lovely. Wonderful.
And yeah, depending on how you manage your oven, they can even get crispy. So they're kind of like potato chips, but they're really healthier and better. And of course, you can use a different oil. This was avocado oil that I used because it'll handle high heat, but I often make them with olive oil too.
Okay, that's great. Good to know that you can use avocado oil for this kind of preparation. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So,
wanna eat that?
yes. Thank you so much for sharing this recipe and the accompaniments. And thank you for being with us, both of you. And so everyone out there, let's thank Deanna and Tyrus and enjoy the fantastic Maryland-style crab cakes and accompaniments. Bye.
Great. Thank you, Annalisa. It's a great series. Thanks.
Thank you.